Zoning Commission regarding the zoning regulation rewrite. For the meeting, first of all, are there any board or commission members here? I would ask you folks to come to the front row if you could, please. Because we want to make this kind of like an interactive discussion. Sam is from the COG. So Sam will be, Sam and our co-chair, Denise, kind of be running and capturing data. So just for anyone, for purposes of introduction, we have with us this evening, Sam Gold from the River COG. We have our permanent members. We have Michael Barnes, our alternate. We have, go start this way from the table. Let's see if I can do it backwards. Yeah. Jane Marsh, secretary. And we have, let me see, Denise Savageau, Bonnie Reemschneider, Mary Jo Nozel, Sam Gold I introduced. I'm Paul Orzel. I guess that was it. We're all here. Mm-hmm. Good. All right. Denise, I'll let you kind of take it off. I don't think we need to read anything here. It is a stakeholder meeting. It's a focused meeting. So
yeah. So we're want to make sure that what we've laid out in terms of the rewriting process is kind of a twofold structure. And one is to have community workshops and then follow those up with stakeholder focus group workshops. And those are primarily with the commissions that are going to be dealing with the subject matter. So right now we've held the one on the environment. So we held a community workshop. We heard from the public. And then we had a meeting with the, boards and commissions and some of our other stakeholders like the Land Trust that also, so they could get the benefit of the community workshop input. And then they could say like, okay, this is what we've been discussing. This is how it fits into our discussion so that we're also hearing from the commissions. So we did that with the environment. We've just did the housing. We had the community workshop for the housing. There was, 60 plus people in the room. So we had a good turnout for that in what we thought was a great turnout actually for the summer. And now this is the focus group where we're looking at the commissions that we work with, including, obviously our commission. And what we've asked is Sam Gold with River COG to kind of lead that discussion. And I know he will do a great job kind of going through, that. And the idea is to kind of have a dialogue. We're here to listen. The commission is here to listen to you. We may ask questions for clarification, but our job, we're trying to get information from you. We're not expecting this to be a one and done. It may be that we find out that, the Planning Commission has more they need to say to us, and we may schedule a separate meeting just with them about a particular issue. We may do the same thing with any of the other boards, maybe the affordable housing boards, any of the other boards that are here. There's a lot of boards that deal with housing and land use and the zoning rewrite. So it could be any board that, deals with that. And it may be, like I said, that more things come up. I don't know, Sam, are you going to talk about, I don't know if Eric asked you to talk about this, but the two processes we're going through at the same time. Are you going to talk about that?
No.
Okay, so let me, so I just want to,
that could be.
yeah, I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because most people have heard it. And a lot of folks who are on another committee or working with COG. But when we're talking about housing, there's two things that are happening simultaneously for the town. One is this zoning rewrite. We started down this process last year. We kind of did a cleanup of the regs just because they needed to be reordered and there was stuff that needed to be done to clean them up. Now we're in this, what we're looking at is the substantial changes. What are the changes to the zoning regs we need to do? And particularly tonight, we're going to be focusing on housing. But for those of you who don't know, there was some legislation that was passed in 2025 that also deals with housing. And so the commission has been dealing with that. So there's two tracks. So sometimes you're like, well, why are they running ahead and doing that when they're doing the zoning rewrite and they're trying to get comments for that? So there's things that had to happen. We had a deadline of July 1st to take care of some of the legislation, and that had to do in the commercial zones where they now basically were allowing residential housing and commercial zones, and we had to deal with that. And Rivercog was taking the lead, getting good information out to us on that. And then, but there's other things that are also that legislation required, and that is to have Rivercog work with municipalities to develop a housing plan, a housing growth plan. And that's not going to take place till after we're done. I mean, they're not going to have that information to us until we're basically done with the zoning rewrite. So we're going to be so we're going down parallel tracks, and no one knew when we started the zoning rewrite that we were going to have Public Act 25-1 get passed. There's been stuff happening in the legislature, and we don't know, who knows what's going to happen in the legislature in 2020, it's 2026, but we're going parallel tracks. So just want people to understand that because we have these, actually the first selectman has put together a work group that includes planning, zoning, and affordable housing, because we're working very closely with Rivercog on this Public Act 25-1, and that work group is focused on that piece. Obviously, then we bring it back to all of our commissions, but I just want to make sure everybody understood that. So sometimes if you're asking a question, we're like, okay, this is why we did this now and where we're going. Because a lot of people say, well, why did you just change the regs July 1st? Why did you do that when you have a whole zoning rewrite? And I will say the one thing we did was we knew we were doing the zoning rewrite, so we updated the regulations, basically understanding that we could possibly change them once we got more input, but we needed to have something in place so that if we didn't have something in place, a developer could have come in and just said, as of right, I can do this. We needed to put something in place so that says they have to come to the commission and do certain things. So we wanted to make sure we had some constraints around Public Act 25-1. That said, the constraints we put around it may need to be tweaked, and that's something we may take care of during this rewriting process. It may be something that we say, you know what, with all the stuff we heard, we're still going to wait for the housing growth plan to fix it. It's like we're not sure, but we want to make sure people, like I said, understand that there's two processes that we're going down, and we're trying to manage them as best we can, thankfully with help from the COGS, and thanks to the other commissions who understand this as well. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Sam to kind of lead us through some of the discussion on some of the things that we want to talk about, and what we heard at the workshop, the community workshop, and then also what you guys want to tell us that you've been working on in terms of your commissions and what we need to be focused on. So, and maybe before we start, we should just do, everybody who's on a commission. So we'll do introductions. I think that would be a good thing.
Before we begin that, I just want to mention, for as a point of reference, the meeting is scheduled 6:30 to 8:30. So that's it. We can go. We can start over there.
Yeah.
I'm Stephanie Mengel, BPA.
I'm Dimitri Bolchinski, WPCA.
Russ Todd, Historical District Commission.
Howard Morgan,
Planning.
planning, and co-chair of, it's hard to get out, the Housing Strategic Planning Steering Committee, which is a group that Denise was talking about. So it consists of planning, zoning, affordable housing. And the idea is to, in the past, a lot of these big projects, we're working independently, and could have been better communication, coordination. It's an attempt to bring people together early and kind of coordinate and communicate our efforts.
Mike Riccio, Planning Commission.
Ross Higgins, Affordable Housing.
Peter Paisley, Chairman of the Lawrence City Center.
I'm the minutes clerk, because your minutes person is not here.
Okay, and then just public and Jim.
Just read the email. I'm here as a member of the public. I did not come to attend the zoning commission meeting per se. I misread the email from Craig. So I can operate however you want me to.
You're a member of the commission, so you're an alternate member. So
I am, yeah. I just happen to be seated here. So
Trying to get out of the house, are you?
sorry for any confusion.
yeah,
So you're going to be part of the commission there.
it's fine. You can sit wherever you want.
Seated, obviously. So
Right.
This is just a work, this is a focus group workshop, so.
Thank
And you just joined us. What commission are you on?
Yeah. Sure. Ethics.
Oh, the what?
Ethics.
Sure.
Ethics.
Okay. Yeah. Hi, we're just doing introductions. Are you here representing a commission or are you just a member of the public? Okay. Why don't you come up front? Because anybody, we did, so just to let you know, we said boards, commissions, as well as staff that may have things to say about, housing. So, why don't you join us up? We want the people, if it's public, that's not going to be part of our focus group discussion. We want them in the back, but the people who, because we want to make sure everybody up here knows that these are people that can speak. Okay. All right.
So, I don't know, thank you for the going about the double track. I wasn't exactly sure what you were referring to.
Yes.
But I think that is a really important point. And although you are on separate tracks with what the requirements of Public Act 25-1 and your own zoning rewrite, I think you can think about the changes that 25-1 requires now to get a head start. And what the housing growth plans, although it's a housing growth, that's the name of it, is housing growth plan. What they are looking and asking municipalities to do is find locations that work for affordable housing. The RiverCog has a deadline of June 1st of next year to give a number of deed restricted affordable units for each of the member towns of the COG. The municipality then has 30 days by the end of June to decide if they want to plan for that number or they want to use a different methodology to come up with a different. And then you have a year to write your housing growth plan. The Office of Policy Management is asking for these plans to be more comprehensive, to look at all types of housing for all of your housing needs. Although the only metric in the statute is units of a deed restricted affordable housing. Of course, we all know that that's only one small sliver of the pie, of the housing pie. It's probably some of the hardest housing to get built because it needs to be deed restricted, but it also doesn't meet all of our needs. But unlike the POCD, unlike any other plan that we do in Connecticut, this is actually the first plan that statute requires that you implement in zoning. In some states, there's requirements like, let's say, California. You pass a comprehensive plan, you got to update your zoning regulations to be in conformity with the plan. If you want to change the zoning regulations, you have to change the plan. That sort of conformity requirement is very new to Connecticut, and this statute requires that. So the recommendations for areas of town which approaches for affordable housing are required to come with zoning updates as part of it once the plan is done. If there are areas that are conducive in part of your zoning update, you get a head start, and it's work that won't have to wait until later. These are important things to think about, particularly when you're thinking about housing and residential zoning, because it's coming. And then furthermore, I think the way that you explained the July 1st deadline was really appropriate. It was not something that towns did because they were forced to. They did it to protect themselves. Because if you didn't update your zoning regulations for commercial districts, really there would be no grounds for denial because there's no standards to apply. And that's unfortunately how a lot of these, how this Public Act works is that it forces the towns to take quick action to protect themselves. But there's a lot more specificity that could go into future regulations because currently the wording of the statute is this middle housing, which is 2 to 9 units of housing, or mixed use. Well, you could identify in some parts of town, mixed use might be conducive. Other parts of town, it might be only 2 to 9 units. And you could add a lot of more nuance and specificity, which of course no town in the limited time that they had from understanding what the Public Act meant, which really wasn't until February, March to July 1st, really didn't get enough time to really do a full planning process to figure out if you wanted to revisit that. So I was glad to hear that that's something which might be considered as part of that, is that there's nothing in the Public Act that doesn't allow you to regulate the density, regulate height, setbacks, all the different things that you normally regulate in a site plan. So, but it really does open up your commercial districts for 2 to 9 unit housing by right, virtually by right. There is the only difference between by right and this summary review process is a restatement of health and safety, which is the basis of zoning anyway. So it's almost redundant, but it could be the grounds for which a commission deny. Well, actually, it's not. It's not supposed to be a discretionary vote. It's supposed to be a yes or no based on the application. It's not supposed to be discretionary. So you have grounds if there is a health or safety issue.
Can I just ask you something,
Yeah.
Sam? I thought it was 2 to 9 housing units on each commercial property. Am I wrong?
Right. It's a development of between 2 and 9 units. Yes.
So the only density, we could say that you can only have 2 on every one.
Well, you could say that you need 5 acres per unit. And if
We
you,
could do that.
and if you don't have, if you want to build 9 units, you have to have 45 acres. So, you know, there's no limitation. Density is not, you're not limited in determining the density of.
Oh, I didn't understand that we could do
Right.
that.
I didn't understand.
I don't think anybody on the commission
Right,
understood.
and
we could do that.
and to be quite honest, I don't think the legislators understood it either. There's a lot that's in this. It was, the Public Act was rushed. There's a lot of issues in it, and we're all sort of functioning under a bill that passed in 3 days. So
Because we have a basic 3/4 acre size limit for all development that's not sewered. And most of the houses of the town isn't sewered, so we didn't say anything about that in our reg.
well, I would say that would come under health and safety if there's no.
That's what DEP said way back. You wouldn't know whether they believe in it now, but
But it also, by creating this new by right category, it sort of punts it a little bit to the health department, the health district, to say
Which is
no.
bad.
Well, yeah, which more or less leaves it to the sanitarian to say, oh, no, you can't build this, which is not necessarily good planning, but but this is a whole new area. This concept of summary review was introduced 2 years ago in a poorly thought out bill about nursing homes that would allow the conversion of nursing homes into apartments. And they created this concept of summary review, but it was taking a institutional residential use and turning it into another residential use. I think the public policy issue about nursing homes is a whole nother discussion, but whether we wanted to give off ramps to close more nursing homes. But that it's not tested in any, there's no court cases, we have no case law. So there's no guidance on this. So it's really a wild west as to what this means.
that makes me feel a lot better if we could
Okay.
adopt that, because that was feeling pretty bad
But
otherwise.
depending on who your legal counsel is, some lawyers say, because there's nothing out there, go test it. So, but I think this is an important discussion because it's in the background. And as you're updating your zoning, you really should be keeping an eye towards what you're going to be required to do in the next couple of years with those housing growth plans, and particularly for I think that the idea for the affordable housing is that the towns will zone for areas where it's most conducive as sort of a preemptive 830G. Although 830G is still in effect, so developers don't have to follow the zoning that you set. So. Yeah.
If I can ask, so the River Cog, you guys are designating a designated amount of housing stock that has to be, like, each town is going to be required to have X amount of housing stock that's affordable. I'm trying to understand how your plan implements into the community.
So it is, so no one's required to build the housing. It is about creating a plan that can accommodate a certain number of deed restricted affordable housing units. And the definition of affordable is a little different than 830G. 830G was 60 and 80% of AMI. This includes a very low category of 30% of AMI. But still, these are probably people who are already in your community. If you work at Big Y, you're probably in that 30% of AMI category as a checkout clerk. So there is need across the state for this housing. But as for how we come up with those numbers, we're still promulgating methodologies for that. And the town is still free to go its own way. That's a decision they'll have to make. And ultimately, there's an option to work with the RiverCog and sort of hire the RiverCog as your consultant. It's an affirmative ask made by the town, or you're on your own. At the end of the year, that housing growth plan comes to the RiverCog for review and comment, but we don't approve it. It's approved by the Planning Commission and the First Selectman. It then gets sent up to OPM for their approval. If they don't approve it within a certain time frame, it goes to this new housing council, and then they have the power to approve it or not. And then I think if you do not have an approved plan, I think the stick is there's some limits in state funding.
Funding, it's funding.
Yeah, it's funding that your town may not be eligible for.
So
Yeah.
not to get sidetracked by 25A.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
but now everybody understands
Yeah.
we've got two parallel tracks.
Yeah.
That said, we're here tonight to
Right.
talk about, some of the things that have come up. And I know that you've got, so Eric had put together some of the ideas of categories. I don't know if he's.
Yeah,
he had
and that's what I was
talked to you
thinking
about-
of using for this.
Yep. So
So please, if there's copies up here, if you haven't grabbed one, this is a summary of the stakeholder discussion from July 29th. And so on the left, you'll see the stack from IMEG, and they were the consultants who facilitated the discussion. And then this is Eric Knapp's summary of it. And he did.
Sheila, if we could have you sit up the front as part of the discussion. Thanks. We're asking the commission members to sit up front. Thanks.
So Eric broke it down into 5 different categories. And I'm thinking it might be helpful to go category by category. And I was planning on just typing up some notes in the document with ideas of what kind of things were you hearing and what the approach would be.
Take a look.
You can have one of my one.
There you go.
They're in a method when you can have mine.
And if I think you ran out of copies, but I'm sure we can get this email to everyone in attendance.
Yes. So if you could just share it with someone sitting next to you,
And it's up on the screen as well.
and it's up on the screen as well.
Percent
What we want to do is, so the comments are into 5 categories, and the comments we heard at the community session. That said, we're interested in hearing what you guys have to say. So I just want to make sure you understand that these are just comments. This isn't a plan at this point.
Yeah, and I just want to quickly go over. So the first category that Eric created out of the comments was about accessory dwelling units, and his characterization was there was a strong desire to allow ADUs on a more relaxed basis than the current zoning regulations, particularly in the RU 80 and 40 zones. Right now, accessory dwelling units are very difficult to build in town, as many of you know. It's limited to structures that are 30 years old and that have not changed in those 30 years. And it severely limits who can build accessory dwelling units and their usefulness as a form of housing. For anyone who has never heard of accessory dwelling unit, there's something called granny flats, or it's usually a small additional apartment that's either carved out of the existing building structure, or is built as an add-on to a structure, or it could be as part of an outside garage or as a standalone on the property. And typically they're constructed for family members, either younger or older, and they're typically rather small. So it might be a 500 or 600 foot apartment. It is a way of accommodating additional units in a way that is usually somewhat invisible in the neighborhood. And if And if you think about it this way, if your zoning regulations would allow a homeowner to add another bedroom and bathroom to their house, it could be seen as no different than that. Because yes, you might be able to accommodate an additional person in that house. But ultimately, the only difference is the relationship between those people.
I have a process question.
Yeah.
So I know we've had the public meeting and this is kind of.
Yeah.
I guess it's something, but there were 80 people. And I think you're still waiting for your survey results, right?
Yeah, so we're just, yeah.
600 people.
Yeah, so what we're looking for you today is comments, has your commission discussed ADUs? If they haven't, or do you have any reaction to well, our commission is talking about it, but we have some different thoughts, or we support the thoughts you see here. And the thoughts aren't all the same. They may be different thoughts up here as well. And you'll see that in some of the other categories, but that's what we're looking for. What do you want to talk to? So
So, been a real estate broker for many years, and I've seen the advantages of having accessory apartments. I know people in Oline who have moved into family homes that were, or it was converted to an accessory apartment, and it worked very well. I've also loved my clients, invested clients on properties, bought the properties with an accessory apartment. There's still some of the relatives living in them, as relatives move out. Could be their in-laws or their parents, then they would rent to non-relative. So I think that's very important. It's a lot easier to accomplish getting additional units in our community through accessory apartments. So if I heard you correctly, can you say your name and your position?
Oh, yeah, so I'm Sam Golden, the Executive Director of RiverCog. We're the regional planning organization for
Executive Director of
RiverCog, the Lower Connecticut River Valley Council of Governments.
the accessory apartments. Do they count as part of affordable units
Only if they're deed restricted for 40 years.
if they're deed restricted?
Restricted, affordable for 40 years,
And deed
which
restricted,
very few people are going to do.
in what way would deed restrictions apply?
So the deed restriction would have to be that it could not be rented to someone unless they meet the income levels set in statute, which are 30% of AMI, 60% of IMI, or 80% of area median. So very, very few, if any, accessory dwelling units are deed restricted. It would be there is this concept of naturally occurring affordable housing, but PA 25-1 does not take that into account.
So the historic district has multiple residential zone types in it. And I guess I heard the comment that ADUs are interior or exterior. I think the historic district is a residential rule originally thought of. And so the idea of an interior additional unit is one thing. New structures in the very narrow defined historic district would be of interest to understand. So that difference between exterior and interior.
Yeah,
How the commission might specify.
right.
And again, we're almost like, what's it, overlay or it's a historic overlay of the residential zone.
And I think the ADU regulation would fall fully under the purview of the historic district. So there's nothing in with ADUs that would exempt that property owner from going through the historic district process. So.
Well, my question though, does it imply new structures or does it really reinforce?
Well, that is, I think, up for discussion.
Right.
Yeah,
That's what I'm
yeah.
yeah.
And it might be site specific as to the attributes of the site, right?
So we're still in the information gathering phase. So we're not saying whether, but it's all.
I'm raising that, and in particular piece of the historic district.
Caught that down.
It's,
Yep.
it's one item compared to other residential areas.
So you're saying
Just
you
to
wouldn't,
remind people that, we have Affordable Housing Commission 2022 did a full report recommendations, and that was approved by the Board of Selectmen. So we're kind of not starting from scratch. We have this body of work, which is excellent, available to us. And, you know, if you look at that, one of the things says create opportunities for additional accessory, middle and starter housing to meet the needs of seniors, young people, and smaller households. So, and then they go on to talk about in-law apartments, et cetera, et cetera. So, you know, we're not, we don't really have to start from scratch. We have this plan that is in place, and we should just build on that. Might need to be updated, but, you know, it's there.
Well, we understand, we have all the plans, but what we're saying, so are there comments about the plans? Does everybody in this room agree with what is in that plan right now? So this is the comments we're trying to get. So we understand there's plans out there. So,
The comment is just, you know, reality, as we all know, we don't have a lot of land to build on. So, you know, this has to be one of our strategies, our primary strategy, maybe, for increasing housing. And it's probably one that's, I would think more would be have more of a consensus than some of the other options.
What would your feeling be for ADUs in the beach communities?
I don't know enough myself about the beach communities. I don't live there. So I don't know.
So
What
it's
would
not
yours
part,
be?
it's not part of your,
What would yours be?
well, you're not gonna, I'm not supposed to be talking.
Okay.
But to me, that's the only areas that have structural solutions, so. But I'm just curious what you would feel about it, because
That's a good point.
we've always been a little nervous about that.
Because we want to address the beach communities, especially that we now have a sewer project moving forward. Right, so we know the sewer project is going to take in Old Lyme Shores, Old Colony, and Miami Beach Association. That's going to address at least 500 homes. So in that association, there's a number of homes there that are zoned for seasonal use. So there's a.
They can't be zoned for seasonal use anymore, because we had to abandon that whole thing.
Years
You
ago,
abandoned this.
We had to, we were sued.
25
Yeah,
years
but
ago.
The problem is that the dwellings have to meet the building code standard to be year round.
Correct, so there'll probably be a number of those homes that will try to move from seasonal to full occupancy. So that, if they do, that will somewhat, those are smaller homes, that will somewhat address some of the senior housing, smaller units becoming available. My own expectation is that the people living south of Route 156 are looking that, were told that they would probably have an increase in property value of about 30%. I think once the sewers go in, there's a good chance that they'll find that paying for the sewers is probably becoming unaffordable. And that it's the best approach now is to take and sell the house and realize that gain. So that might make a lot of availability, may make more availability for movement in that area.
That's not creating a single new housing unit.
That's not, no, that's not an ADU I'm talking about. I'm talking about the house itself becoming available. The lots are still small. The ability to build an extension to the house is somewhat limited. Be more up to you, though. They probably could do some building with some of those lots. Some of those lots, you know, were to where the zoning got changed so that the adjacent lot became not buildable. And then it became such that you could, you know, some of those people own an adjacent lot now.
Yeah.
Those could be an ADU. That could be quite. That could happen. I think the zoning commission should support that. And there's not a big volume.
Sheila,
Unless I'm missing something based on what Sam was saying and everything that we know to this point. And I'm knocking down the ADU piece. I mean, personally, I would love to be able to do that for my in-law. But it doesn't address the affordable housing side of things. So having that be part of the plan, that was well before certain restrictions, I think, have come into place, and seeing people enter into deeded agreements. I don't know how that would. I just don't see that happening a lot.
One thing I want to point out, there's one comment that stood out for me is the last comment E. Try and limit ADU usage to prevent transient use. I think what they're referring to is Airbnb and VRBO. And that it is a risk if you are going to emphasize these small rental units and they're in beach communities. How do you reserve them as housing for residents as opposed to an income source potentially for that is competing with the hotels or whatever? Yeah.
Of course, the beach areas have been that
But that's
the
how,
whole
but
time.
that's historically how they've been. So
week at a time.
it may not be a winning argument, but it is a concern.
What is that by age friendly?
We don't, I don't know exactly. That was the question. Like I was reviewing this myself, like what one thing is, there's many ways that you can interpret age friendly. There's a concept called universal design where you design, let's say you design that unit to have level entry. So you're not dealing with steps. It's not on a second floor. It has enough room in the bathroom. So you can have bathrooms and maybe even a wheelchair to get in. So there are certain building standards for making a unit more friendly for aging in place. And you could also imagine an ADU where at some point the homeowner flips and moves into the ADU and rents out the house. Particularly if it's a single person, now it's a single person household, they don't need the whole house and they decide that they want to stay there and they rent out the main house for income.
I think to the last legislature, didn't they have legislation about loosening the rules on ADUs when it was defeated?
Yes, I was actually debating whether I should bring that up. There is discussion about, so back in, I think it was 2020 or 2021 session, there was a mandate on ADUs that allowed towns to opt out and have their own regulations. Oline opted out and kept its own regulations. There has been a lot of interesting ideas that come up in a session, and that was one of them that was sort of forced the issue. And that bill was did not pass. But it could very well come back.
I have a question. If an ADU is added to a property, does that increase the housing? That's increases the available housing stock. So therefore it's going to require additional affordable units?
Not necessarily. So it's the methodology for looking at how many units are needed is not based on necessarily your existing housing units. It's looking at other needs of your residents based on income levels and a number of other factors. But it just adding housing units does not necessarily do that. Although under 830G to not fall under that 10%, every unit you add gets you further away from the 10%. But really none of our towns in River Cog, except for the city of Middletown, are anywhere near that 10%. And it's not really a reasonable goal for really any of our towns. There is such a thing as a moratorium that a town can get if you make some progress towards getting towards 10%, but it just sort of delays the inevitable because that moratorium eventually expires. And during that time that you have the moratorium, you're probably building market rate housing anyway. So it gets you farther away from the goal, the 10%. And the 10% was never a mandate on the towns. It is a developer's option. So the developer has the option to choose to do an 830G. But it's not a mandate on the town that they shall provide this number of units.
Right.
And the same thing comes with this affordable housing plans or the housing growth plans. It's to show that you could accommodate the units. But reality is that housing unit for someone making 30% AMI is not going to be able to be built with us.
Well, I was just going to say that if you're expecting a 30% AMI, it's not, the cost of construction is going to outweigh the rent income, right?
And it ends up becoming these plans may actually throw it back at the state and say, growth may be able to accommodate these places, but it will never happen without, X% subsidies to make these things, pencil out. And I think that's ultimately what will be interesting in this upcoming session is to whether the General Assembly will show the money, have the money or not. If
Right.
there's no money, it's not happening.
Yeah, because no developer is gonna make money on it 30%.
So if we could just continue our discussion.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to make sure we get everything covered.
And there's one other interesting comment here. The consensus seemed that 2 doors on a dwelling, where the next dwelling was closed was not favored. Like we were a little confused at Rivercog just because a lot of houses will have like a main door and then a mudroom. And so I think it's really just, it's a design issue here that there was a concern.
That's my question.
Yeah.
It's like, how do you do ADUs? What are the different ways of creating that from a physical access and structure? Or is that even defined? Or can the commission define it?
Well, in the historic district, you have a lot more power to define those things. And furthermore, if you were to establish a village district, you would have similar, but for new build. I think locations, those are things that can be part of the discussion.
Are you saying you were confused by that comment?
Yeah.
In the group that we were in, it appeared that when they showed a picture of a duplex
Yeah.
with a door side by
Yeah.
side, so you could clearly see this is one unit and this is another. It was over 90% were against it. So I think that that's where that
Okay.
comment came from. And maybe the consideration there is to not have that mirror image, have the design so that it's more pleasing.
Yeah.
And not sure how that those images, how they fit into ADUs, because ADUs are not.
But because
No.
ADU is going to be inherently smaller. Yeah.
But
Yeah.
if you have a house with the door here and you add on over here and you put the front
Yeah.
door right next to it, and it's clear that that's a side-by-side
Yeah.
unit, that may be what people react to. So maybe zoning
Yeah.
changes to accommodate that. Do
Yeah.
everything you can to make the entrance on another side.
Yeah.
Whatever.
That makes sense.
Right.
Are there any other ideas on ADUs, accessory dwelling units?
You mentioned O-line chose not to last time when the ADU was brought up. I was curious as to, and maybe somebody else here knows why did O-line
I
choose?
can tell you.
Okay, go ahead.
So the ADUs that were being talked about in that bill were these separate things that people could buy.
Granny pots.
Yeah.
The
Oh, yeah. I forgot.
pods. They were not part of a house. They were just things that got parked on the land and only for so long as you had a granny, and then they were supposed to disappear. And we took one look at that and said in the beach areas, that would be off.
Right.
So we just couldn't see that that was a good addition to the town.
Was also rushed. You had to just
Right.
make a decision right away.
But it was a marketing kind of a thing where they were marketing these things to people.
Yeah.
You had to have a separate driveway, which some of this is based on trying to work within existing infrastructure. And as I recall, one of the proposals for that was that you would have to develop another road into that ADU, and
Yeah.
it was sort of self-defeating.
Yeah, thank you for.
But any other comments on ADUs? I probably should have a comment about them being about ADUs with affordable housing, because this is an issue, is that the intervention that is relied upon in 25-1 is these deed restrictions, when there's lots of ways to intervene for affordability. But your homeowners are not going to put a 40-year deed restriction on.
No, especially not against their relatives.
Yeah. Well, it would be for the relative who may not be paying rent anyway.
Yeah.
Wait, you're still here?
And just
Sorry.
a
Sorry,
reminder to the other
Too
fellow,
much income, Granny.
if you bring this back and discuss it with your commissions, like I said, this isn't the end of the dialogue. You can either give us stuff, additional information in writing on any of these topics, but I'll keep reminding folks that as we're talking about this, think about we need to have, if you need to have this discussion at your commission, And if you would want to give us something in writing or talk to us more about any of the topics. So I'll keep reiterating that.
I just wanted to mention, I mentioned earlier, that, posted that last year, we're having a discussion, see, Senate board meeting about aging in place. And, the population in Old-Line, a year ago, 65 to 80, there was 1,633 people, which is a substantial number. And 85 plus, there were 192 people. I don't suspect that they changed that much, but there are a lot of residents that we can accommodate and still fit the quota for the affordable house numbers.
I'll give you an example that a number of the town's senior housing is deed restricted affordable. And so that counts towards, that would count towards this if that was an approach. I know Essex's senior housing is done that way. So there is potential there, and I think that addresses the comment here and make ADU regulations. That's separate than the ADU and age friendly, but I think having those thoughts of ADUs and trying to promote them as a solution for your aging population, while at the same time being an opportunity for younger residents as well.
Yeah, and having the senior move into the accessory apartment, rent out the main house is very viable. It's good for so many people. There are 2 residents that I know that would love to do that. They would love to have an accessory apartment. Would be very helpful for our residents.
Yeah, I last year my mother moved to a senior apartment. If that was an option in her house was way too big for her to just flip that. That would have been a viable option for her, but it really wasn't. You know, to do a construction project was not really a viable solution.
Yeah. Make it separate.
The seniors, if we can keep them aging in place, which is also on our board's radar, try to help them. We have a community service, community care service that volunteers can go to people's homes. Of course, everyone's better now to and help them, do chores for them and help them. And these are the seniors that have lived here most of their life, all their life, of course, contributed to the tax base. They pay the tax and they were involved. And keeping them in town, I think, is very important.
I'll let you pivot off this subject, but the ADUs with the sewers going in, is that even a viable option? Because aren't the sewers sized specifically for the exact house count now? So that's really not even an option if they're increasing the bedroom load in that area.
Yeah, in that situation, you might have to do something internal where you're really cutting into these, taking existing.
Yeah, you're eliminating a bedroom in your home to add it to somewhere else.
Yeah. Well, the next category was rural character, was an area that was discussed. There was a discussion of attendees like the town's open forests and open spaces, mixed message on cluster style subdivisions to protect this. Drinking water and groundwater capacity was a concern. Balanced housing need with the preservation of qualities that make Old-Lyme distinctive. Attendees gave a strong sense of what we did not want, which is want in Old-Lyme. They don't want to become like Niantic or Brantford. So, reviewing this, I had a few questions. Some of it was a discussion of, mapping, of like understanding where are the town's important open spaces and forests that these participants were really talking about. And also where do you have those drinking water and groundwater capacity concerns? So some of this seemed like some mapping exercises. And then, trying to think about what are the qualities that make Old-Lyme distinctive? Because if you're looking to protect them, you need to know what those qualities are.
Well, it was very clear when we did the clicker survey, where they did the clicker survey, that they didn't want any townhouses, period. Every time anything like that was shown up, they huge negative. So
Stu Leonard's didn't fly either.
question, and I'm not sure if this can be addressed here, but every time I hear the that pushback against not wanting Old Lyme to become Branford, Niantic, Clinton, Westbrook, whatever, Old Saybrook is cited a lot. And I don't know if maybe this is what you were saying just now, but is the do we think the intent behind that is the amount of open space that has been turned into mixed housing or mixed use rather, or businesses? Because when I think of all these other communities, we don't have what they have in terms of a main drag. I mean, our biggest main drag is Halls Road, and that's not a main drag. Like that's, so I struggle with, I get it, like none of us want to be that.
Yeah.
And yet I don't understand why where that sentiment comes from. I'm probably asking you to speculate, but.
I don't think it is the main drag thing. I'm old enough to remember when the townhouses on Boggy Hole and Peppermint Ridge were built. And right after those were done, there was a massive uprising in the town against that kind of housing. And so if you think about in East Lyme, what you can see from the turnpike, the housing up on the hill, you know, it's a lot of housing. It looks a particular way. That's what the residents of Old Lyme do not want. At least that's my opinion.
Yeah, I have a couple of opinions on that as well. Yeah.
I think that's.
I want to like not have feedback so much. So if we could say more, give us your thoughts.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in what interpretations are to that, because I think it's important we understand what that means to people.
And I think C and D should be sort of thought together, because C is, you know, preservation qualities of Old Lyme that makes it Old Lyme distinctive. And then we don't want it to be Niantic or Branford. So I think they really need it, but those concepts are concepts that need to be further defined and fleshed out.
Yeah.
It's clear. People don't want the big housing units.
Yeah. Overdevelopment.
Development.
Yeah.
It's busy in those communities. You drive through and you're in traffic.
When I think of Branford, I think you have like a lot more commercial development. I think of Niantic, I think more tourism focus.
Not even.
A lot of commercial.
Commercial, yeah.
In my group, it came across as density and scale. The Old Lyme is more rural, scale of buildings relative to the landscape,
Mhm.
and just general density.
I guess I just don't see how we could become that.
Well, redoing Halls Road to be a downtown scenario with mixed use would be a perfect example of that scenario. If you're going to create buildings and you're going to move them close to the road, right now our buildings are set back from the road, so the scale seems smaller. But if you eliminate the need for the setbacks, you move it up to the road, now the scale seems bigger because it's right in front of you.
But it's a block, maybe.
Right. I think that's where, and that's where our discussion, I think.
I don't see how it could happen.
Well, you put a couple of big developments along Boston Post Road where people can see them, make them townhouses. That would.
Is there property
Yeah, yes, there's quite a bit of property in Old Lyme.
But that sounds different. Again, I guess my point would be, at least from the affordable housing standpoint, I want to understand what that means.
Well, it'd be a good survey to pro.
Yeah. I mean, when you said, when people, because I bet it means something different for everyone who's saying,
I'm sure.
you know? And so I think it's important to pull the overall sentiment out of that so that we know what not to do. That's it.
And whereas I think, you know, that idea of an opportunity for a survey to flesh out, you know, that more. And I looked through IMEG's summary of like, yeah, anything that looked like, you know, apartments or townhouses, you know, there's 65% against. Yeah, it was very high percentage. But at the same time, like the first two ones, A and B, are really about preserving the natural areas, but also about the carrying capacity of the land. Because when you're dealing with septic and well, you know, I think that's B, drinking water and groundwater capacity was a concern. That's really about the carrying capacity of the land to support development, and making sure that you don't, cause problems, but also on the first one is really understanding what are the defining open spaces and forests that are important.
You mentioned, you didn't see how they can develop that whole road. The developer gave them the leeway where the Y is and across the street, where the hideaway is, they can develop that to the max. That's one of the proposals that go forward on the overlay. I mean, it could happen if the zoning permitted it, they could build both parcels to the maximum, and you fly on the whole road, and you could think if you're in Branford or the units in Saybrook, the
First, for mile.
Well, yeah, that's our
Yeah.
our downtown, and we change the character there forever.
One other comment that we discussed in the historic commission, I know the zoning commission is talking about it, but it's just lighting. Old Lyme is a fairly dark, if you look on a dark sky now, it's a very dark area. And not only when we talk about density, it's density not only of traffic, but lighting. And for the historic district, not just what's in the historic district, the lighting that might exist there that we have comment on, but it should be any lighting that's directly adjacent to the historic district, and then changing the character of the district. So I just wanted to, and that's been a talk.
Along with lighting, one thing we brought up that wasn't really in the purview is dark sky, not just for commercial, but new construction or replacement lighting, dark sky everywhere, lighting.
So we looked at that in the conservation zone, the Gateway Conservation Zone. But are you saying we should look at that across
As an astronomer.
as an
Bias.
birders have that same bias, just to let you know. I just wanted to, look, because we do have it in certain areas, but I was just looking at it.
One thing I would be concerned, or I would err on the side of caution is in essence, is creating a townwide HOA. That's my fear for some, and that's just an unfounded fear, but like, as you start to implement dark sky compliant, you start to do different things, and not so much the dark sky, I have no problem with that actually. But like, as we start to redefine our zoning regs, I'm just scared of people's property rights in that same thought. And I don't want to create the ability of almost like a townwide HOA. I don't know. That's just my own thought process. I don't know if you understand what I'm saying when I say that.
I don't understand.
So like in an HOA, they restrict the way your house looks. They restrict the way, how many cars you have in your driveway. There's so many restrictions in an HOA, homeowners association. Whereas I don't want our zoning reg, I mean, that is in essence an HOA book, right? That's a zoning regs, but I just want to make sure that we don't create too much restrictions on everybody's personal private property. I think
the conversation about lighting in particular is more about density and scale, which is different than the number of the type of lights you have, but saying when you build a much taller building.
Correct.
And it's a higher density and you have more lights, and that does impact,
no, I agree with the lighting.
So that's different than HOA, the tribute.
I also, I think one of the things that you see now that you didn't see historically was larger windows. So there's that potential from a lighting perspective when everybody has, the houses didn't have the windows they have now.
They had candles.
They had candles. But they also, didn't have windows because they wanted to keep the heat in. So.
The king taxed your glass.
Yeah, exactly. So, and they taxed your glass.
Yeah.
There you go.
And when this whole section is called rural character, it's sort of, it could be seen as being like the town HOA saying we're going to be this way, and so it's really trying to understand what's really important here and what is full cutoff lighting, so you're not casting glare on your neighbors, that, that's, an obvious one. I mean,
Yeah.
Um, but again, that I appreciate not wanting to be told what to do with your own private property, your own home.
Yeah, it was more, not so much that, it's more like the blight ordinance. It's almost, there's ways within a blight ordinance that it can be considered an HOA.
Yeah.
Whereas there's tools and effects that you can help blighted properties get out of being blighted without having requirements of the strictness of a blight ordinance.
Any other comments on rural character, what that means to you?
Could you talk a little bit about, there's been a lot of discussion at the state about that piece in plan and conservation and development, and can we use that, and how do we, I mean, we can obviously do the zoning, because then we'll just very specifically say, this is what you can and can't do to maintain that. But they're also saying, that character is not one of the things you can, so could you talk about that, or how we have to be cautious about
Yes,
that?
there's been discussion about this, is that character is a poorly defined, discretionary word that commissions use to not deny applications they don't like. And so I'm not necessarily an expert on the legislation of the zoning, the implications of that, but I think as much as you can root things in more factual things, like these are the core, these are the open spaces of forest and the defining natural features that you want to protect, then it's not really just a discretionary, I don't like this. It's like, no, this has a negative impact on X, Y, or Z. And so I think as much as you can in your zoning, sort of identify what's important, what you've heard from the community, what's important, and there's like a logical progression of like, this regulation protects these things or regulates it for this public reason, I think you're in a better place.
Thank you.
I think what they were attacking was, an ill-defined or undefined community character. Like, I know it when I see it, but I won't tell you what that is.
I just want to make sure everybody understood that will be our challenge as we're doing this.
But if you're talking about natural elements, you're talking about certain rural or natural elements that the town wants to protect or wants to be mindful of, I think that's perfectly legitimate. And especially when you're coming down to development that's based on, well and septic, that is, of course, is going to be based on the soils, and it's going to be based on the natural features of that particular parcel. As to what you can put there and how much you can put there. But if there's no more discussion on the rural character one, I'd just like we move on. The next category was a better mixture of housing, which we've already sort of touched upon with the ADUs, but I think is a bigger discussion of so there seemed to be a broad sense that the current mixture of housing options was not meeting the needs of existing and possible future residents. The need to keep and attract young people was mentioned in various ways, but there was no agreement on how to best to do this. And there was a sense that seniors needed better options. Several options were mentioned, age in place. So we touched upon this from ADU. Downsizing without leaving town, and plan for the future. Consider the town's long-term demographic trends and who will live in Old Lyme over the next 20 years. So I think if you take a look at this all together, it's really the things that are left unsaid is that what are the housing options that are not meeting? What are the needs that are not met? And who are the people? And what is needed to keep or attract young people? And what are seniors looking for? So those are some of the questions that I had reading this.
As we were leaving that meeting, someone brought up the point that young people don't really want to live here. There's not a lot to do. I mean, my kids moved out. It's not a big entertainment area that I don't know that we should spend a lot of time trying to get young people to stay, unless, a school teacher with affordable housing. Otherwise, I don't think they really want to be here.
Well, so this is something I was going to plug, and I'm going to just change this. So as part of the preparations for the PA Fit 25-1 work, Rivercog has completed needs assessment, existing condition data packets for each of our towns. And so in looking at that comment, I was thinking about how the town looks when it comes to families of school age children. And actually, Old Lyme is doing a better job attracting or keeping, families with kids than a lot of your peer towns in neighboring towns. And you could do better to sort of balance out your age, but maybe that's what it was being referred to as, like, not necessarily, we're talking about young families as opposed to young people. But that's just a guess.
Schools,
Yeah, I don't.
we're attracting well.
Yeah, I don't think you're gonna have a happening club scene anytime soon.
All right, over here.
Sort of a question to zoning. And that recently we passed mixed use within commercial zones, like C10 and C30. When we discussed this in the planning commission, the particular commercial area along Route 156, which takes up a good part of the C10, C30 zones, would not work, we thought, would not work for mixed use. We thought that perhaps you should have included multi-family. We found it very difficult to see a developer being required to put retail on the first floor at that location. That we felt it would probably not be viable for them to do that. So, the particular areas I'm talking about is like where Cherry Stones used to be. There's now a golf range and so forth, along that whole strip, all the way up to the police department. So we talked about that. We briefly discussed whether or not for the town we should have one of those whether we should look at traffic oriented communities. Whether that would make sense for this town to define certain areas and then specify what could go into those areas. Such, we know the sewers are going to allow greater density perhaps along that strip.
But not on the north side.
But they won't, because they can't increase the volume of septic outside of what's already there.
Yeah, it can't go on the north side of.
So then that won't help with that.
It actually limits it even more, I would think, than it would have before, because before you might have the ability of expanding your septic with the soils that were there, whereas now you're tied into whatever current volume you have. I think that's the way I'm interpreting it, correctly.
That's been evaluated, and you saw studies of that. Okay.
It's a condition.
No, it was a condition of the sewer.
Having it. See, this is a problem that's getting solved. So with all the money that's being used and all the sources that are providing it, they're saying, we're not giving it so you can make another problem. We're going to solve the problem, but then that's it.
Because their systems are already at capacity for the most part anyway. The sewer infrastructure that goes from East Lyme, Waterford, and New London is already almost at capacity.
London's at capacity.
Is the limitation in London?
Yeah, well, I would imagine it's everything along the whole network. So
I
for
think it was
instance,
a condition of the whole consent order project, everything else, that was it. They're going to fix this problem, but they're not going to let the system be expanded into other areas.
like the sewer line that goes to Point of Woods, because they did that 20 years ago, it's sized exclusively for Point of Woods. So no more effluent could be tied into that system. So we're going to parallel that system all the way to, East Lyme. So I'm imagining they're building a size system that's size specific for the beach community right now.
So people in the beach communities will now be served by that sewer system. If they decide to upgrade sort of for all year use versus season, that could put probably just.
No, because.
Or the system being sized for that.
Well, the system is sized for everyday use. So whether you use it,
365.
It would be sized for the max use, so, which would be during the summer. So it would be sized for occupants, full occupancy in the summer. And in the winter, the seasonal units wouldn't be used, but it would have to
Be able to handle that volume if it was used.
It would have been designed to handle the volume of full occupancy.
So then, as a follow-up question then, when you considered mixed use in those commercial zones, did you consider multifamily,
It's considered, but not included.
but not include? You did consider it and you decided not to go forward or to allow multifamily in that area because,
so we didn't at this point, we're taking comments. As we said, we had very short time. So we did something. We'll take, if planning has some other thoughts on that and very specific comments, say them now and also give it to us. We want to make sure people understand that we did something very quickly with recommendations from Rivercog to have something on the books, but we're certainly amenable to change that if we think that the proposed changes will work. So if you have very specific,
have you considered?
we will consider if you tell us what you want us to consider.
So, in fact, that'll be a discussion in planning. We have it on our agenda to talk about, but we were looking at that same commercial area, looking at whether the density within the Southview, that commercial area a little bit along 156 would actually meet the criteria.
So
Along with Holmes Road, would they meet the criteria for a transit-oriented district? That maybe you could define the type of housing. Maybe you could do like cluster housing in there, define it. So if people have problems with duplexes in that area, maybe, is there a way, Sam, when you define a transit-oriented district, then you can define the type of housing that can be placed?
So,
I was gonna say, it would help if you explain what.
yeah, that's what I'm gonna do. So,
For the people who don't know, and what the benefits are to it.
so Public Act 25-1 created a thing called transit oriented communities, which isn't really anything new in that it was always been within the power of the town to be able to increase density in certain areas of the town, increase densities that might be more pedestrian friendly and could potentially be more transit friendly. The reality is that the town has very minimal transit service from Estuary Transit District or River Valley Transit. So you're never going to have the level of transit to actually be transit oriented. But in this specific section, 25-1, it gave an option for towns if they adopted these certain densities in their zoning regulations, it would potentially allow the town to access more state funds. And those state funds have yet to be appropriated. So stay tuned. None of the towns in the Rivercog region, 17 towns, have gone in that direction yet because there's really no point go there until there's money to actually. But in the right place, this could be the right option. But the whole use of transit is a little bit of a misnomer because many of the towns identified have minimal transportation, and it'd be very different. It's very difficult to live in this town without a vehicle. Very, very difficult. The service that we have is very minimal. I think it's 2 hour headways going either to Old Saybrook or to London. And it's there is paratransit service as well for people with disabilities, but it is very limited. But the concept of creating an environment that's in a small area, denser and walkable, where people can walk, that's traditional New England development pre-World War II. That was, every town had a walkable district because that was how people got around.
Right.
So, but Sam, do you know what the transit requirement is? So we have a bus route, say.
There is no.
I mean, we are considered a transit community. We could apply for this.
Yeah, you can apply for it, but the organization who pushed this, I tried to meet with the director with the executive director of our bus company, and it's like, you do know that this, without massively increasing transit service, it'd be very difficult to live here without a car. This is not transit oriented. So it's a little bit of, the use of the term is not really appropriate because Old Lyme is never going to have the level of transit you need to be able to be competitive with cars.
It's like if you built 25 apartments in one location, all the people living there have different time schedules to get to work and everything. And in a transit oriented district, they have a lot of options for buses. Catch any bus and get to where they're going in 20 minutes. We don't have that option here. You have to rely on when the bus goes by, and then the bus has to go on the rest of the route wherever before you get to where it might be close to where you're working. So it could take you an hour to get to work. And that's just, that's part of being in a rural town that makes it challenging for
Yeah, and has
transit.
part of that legislation required the state to put together a committee that was gonna come up with what you needed to do to be, and I'm not sure that has happened yet. So we don't know
Mm.
what the requirements for being a transit-oriented development are yet. So, what the scale would be, what they would be looking at in terms of parking requirements, because the assumption is that you won't need a car. Well,
We can talk about parking if you want. I might as well. So this is something that went into effect on July 1st that everyone should know.
and we already took care of that.
Yeah, is that, if you have a housing development of 16 units or less, you cannot deny it for the lack of parking.
Deny it for lack of what?
Parking. So let's say a developer comes in, puts a 16 apartment unit development in, and there's no parking provided for the residents. That cannot be grounds for denial for that portion. If it's 17 units or larger, the statute now provides a maximum number of parking spaces that the town can acquire based on, I think, bedrooms of the units. Of course, there's nothing stopping the developer from putting in parking, and probably any bank that's financing a project will want to see parking. But the town on its own for smaller projects can't set a parking requirement for 16 or
Yeah.
smaller.
But very specifically in the transit-oriented development, there's going to be standards on that, and they're really looking at, not requiring any parking. So that's a real challenge. So like Bonnie was saying, if you really don't have the transit, it's really, really hard. Because, they say that we're transit because we do have some buses that come in, but it's not like, we're not transit compared to other cities. So it's not like you could just go to the bus stop and take a bus here, to your doctor's appointment or this or that or whatever. Because it's not just about getting to work. It's about it's around town. It's about doing your shopping. It's about doing a whole lot of other things. And so until we know what those requirements are, so I think I would say with transit-oriented development, we want to think about it. And we can do some of that ourselves. We don't have to. We can think about transit-oriented development without being part of the state program. We can think about how to better do, development that kind of works that way. That said, I would be cautious until we know what the requirements are from the committee that the state's supposed to put together so that the towns can buy into that. And that hasn't happened yet.
And I think
We do have some control of frequency of the bus coming down that route. The bus is coming down.
Not that much control.
But I also think we have to make technology impact. It might come into play.
so that is correct. River Valley Transit has on-demand transit, which is in Saybrook, Essex, and parts of Westbrook. We also have a zone in East Hampton and one in Middletown, and then also a successful one in Guilford and Madison. And the idea is the bus runs like an Uber. It's still not, unfortunately. But I think the important thing when you think about transit rides all begin on foot. Because it's walking to a bus stop, walking to a train station, getting on a train, then walking to your destination. So creating a place where you can walk to a destination and walk back and accomplish something on foot is something that even the smallest rural town can accomplish something like that, where there's enough density of something that people can actually walk and do something.
There's a road that we go to in Walton County, Florida, called 30A, and it's multiple communities along the road. They put in sewers. When they did that, they put bike paths on top of sewer lines. Also, it's not directly adjacent to the road, so it's very safe to progress on bicycle. And it is enormously popular. It's a very natural type environment. And so people commute between the different town, the building developments to retail, not on foot, not on car, with bikes. And it's safe.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's
Yeah.
at all possible.
Yeah, and that's where planning ourselves, are there areas where we could do some type, so that would be something to consider. But that's a little bit different than what they're talking about the transit. Yeah.
But, if a community had its own van, somehow, using any, somebody driving, would that count? They have their own.
So there's no real counting for the purposes of necessarily for the program that's transit-oriented communities. It's just to actually fund a competitive public transportation system. It just requires a subsidy, which we just don't have the money.
Yeah, I'm saying it's not public, but private to that community.
Well, it would be publicly funded by that community.
Yeah.
Yeah, so the taxpayers have a finite pocket, unfortunately, and it's expensive. Like the transit district that you're currently part of is funded in part by contribution from the member towns. So Old Lyme is paying into Asteroid Transit District for the bus service you're getting. Most of the operating costs are being subsidized by the state, but there is, I think, by 8% is subsidized by the towns. So there is that, but it's just trying to do the most with what service we have, which is unfortunately skeletal.
And if you kind of go through some of our minutes from those meetings we had, one of the reasons we focused or were advised to actually focus on having the mixed use versus just housing was to protect our the limited commercial area we have on Halls Road. And that was compelling for where we are at this stage with 25-1. One of the reasons we looked at that
Yes.
and that is why.
From the planning commission, we did come back and say that we definitely agree with that mixed use for Halls Road. That to protect the commercial, as you just said.
Until we had the conversation tonight, I guess I didn't even realize that the commercial district down by the Soundview area, the C10, that really can't be expanded into the 2 to 9 units if the sewer is already going to be capped at that size. I just had that thought process while we were sitting here. Like, wait a second. So like, even though we have this mix, it's of no value down in the C10 zone because you can't increase the density down there.
Yeah, you're absolutely right.
So like they hamstrung that because of the sewer.
And that's where that application fails.
Working that in.
Correct. Yeah. So yeah, so I guess that might answer some of your questions about the mixed use in that district because it's limited by the sewer.
Limitation.
Correct.
I don't think there's a way to do central set.
No, not there. I don't know.
So
Maybe.
you can do some, but you just can't do it at any high density.
I'd like to recenter back to this. The topic was a better mixture of housing, and just to touch upon, what you think is the housing that's missing or is needed in the community. I think we've talked about ADUs, but ADUs is like a single apartment here or there. I think this is probably touching upon other types of housing besides detached single family, but what would that be and what would be desirable?
So a couple of questions that come up there that maybe if you go back to your commissions is obviously we talked about age demographics, whether we need, for aging in place and, you know, the older population or younger, whether it be, you know, young people trying to stay in town or, you know, new young families coming in. And that was kind of, but you can also, besides demographic, you know, age demographics, you can also look at, do we need more rental units versus home ownership? And is that, and maybe is that impacting, you know, whether it be the senior population or you know, folks who come into town who might not be able to purchase a house, do we have enough rental units? So just think about some of the other things that impact housing and what we might need when we're talking about housing units, because it's not just about how many bedrooms or whatever. There's also, it's rental versus home ownership. It may be, you know, some other things, maybe, you know, even styles of housing. Do we need to make sure that we have, you know, like that one floor type things, just so that we have more units that are not up and down that we have. So just thinking about housing in different ways. If you have any thoughts and if you have any right now, but otherwise bring those back to your commission, because those are some of the things that we can impact is when we're talking about housing design. If all of our housings are, you know, Cape style, I'm just throwing that out there. But basically where your bedrooms are upstairs, is that good for then when we're trying to meet an aging demographic, for example, or whatever. So just think about all of those types of things that impact housing and what we could do from a zoning perspective.
My observation was, it's always interesting, we have these discussions on alternative housing options, and people at this meeting were all in favor of different options. But then when you show them specific
Yeah.
pictures, everyone's against it.
Yeah.
And I think part of the problem is if you just show a few townhouses, the perception of people's mind is there's rows of townhouses. And without showing the pictures in the context of where it would be, I think, you know, that kind of slants it. So everyone was very much in favor of all these alternative options, and we showed them specific, and everyone was against them. And, you know, it's my observation, it's very interesting. When you go back to the Hope affordable housing project that was proposed a number of years ago, there was going to be the huge issue was traffic. You know, this is a dangerous corner, and people would come out, and there's going to be accidents, and there's just a huge traffic issue. Now in the same area that they're building in McMansions, nobody ever brought up traffic issue.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's really interesting that conceptually people like things, but don't put it in my backyard.
But I think, I think I hear you, but I also think I was looking through the minutes. There were some things, just like you said, it makes sense, but then when you see something else you're discussing, it was like, well, those don't go together. Those don't work. But what I felt is like, there's room for creativity. There's room for spacing homes, like kind of on an angle or something where that's the feedback would really be nice to get from people. It's like, how can we be creative? So it's not a standard side by side or on top of each other. You know, can we angle them or can we have a couple of both, or what would people like to see?
And another thought is the amount of open space that you put aside for any of the buildings that you're building. So should you limit the footprint, even though you may have a lot that's several acres, should you limit the footprint within a certain area of that and then some open space around that? Those are the kinds of ideas that might make it more palatable to people and yet address the various types of housing.
Our biggest stumbling block is going to be the fact that the average home right now, if you want to build a baseline economy home, it's $220 a square foot. So for 600 square feet, it's $132,000 at a bare minimum for the minimum construction. So that's our biggest stumbling block to any affordable housing or any housing for that matter, is the cost of goods and cost of everything, right? So
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I just, in speaking to the design questions, I think that's another area where I feel like it's important to understand what people are saying yes or no to, because I would bet my whole savings, which isn't a lot right now. But I would still bet it because it's all I got. That a lot of people, it was simply based off of taste. Like, ooh, that's something to me. Ooh, and I'm like, ooh. And so teasing out, is it about the footprint? Is it about, you know, whatever it's about? And then I would imagine too, for the zoning commission, your challenge is going to be keeping it broad enough so that, I mean, no matter who builds what, if they're following all of the specs, there are gonna be people that don't like it. It's just not gonna be their taste, you know what I mean? So that's the challenge for you all, I think. But I think it's important to understand what's underneath some of this. And you could, you know, subdivide these surveys until the cows come home. At some point you have to stop, but you know, I think if you really want to get to the nitty gritty, and maybe the current survey that is still up online and still viewable teases a lot of that out for you or us.
Yeah, I think it does a little bit more, but we'll see. But it's definitely the questions we're gonna be struggling with. So that's where looking at that, because I do think it's like, is it just aesthetic? You know, so if it's an immediate visceral aesthetic, is there a way to be creative about the aesthetic, but still get what we need? So for example, if you're gonna put in senior housing, let's just say we all decided we needed more senior housing or 55 plus development, but we didn't like any of those. How would you do that from a design aesthetic that makes it work? And is it about, open space zoning or low impact development zoning, or however, whatever you want to call it? So
what would that fall under right now in terms of the zoning, like the zoning mapping? If somebody like a line, is it Limewood? What is the zone over there? Like, is that it's residential something, right?
It's gotta be 30
R
or
something?
20 or 30, Limewood.
Over by the lake.
Right, but the other senior house,
Yeah, the senior house by the lake.
yeah, those are federal units.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but what's the underlying zone?
Oh, I bet it was RU 40.
Can you scroll down?
So-
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
No,
I wanted to show what, on here. So if you look at these, the first two units that scored relatively highly, they're relatively modest, single family homes on maybe a half acre or something.
Lots of grass.
And, that bottom house, the upstairs could be a separate unit, it could be a two family and you would never know.
Right.
So it's really aesthetics, I think. What was interesting was they didn't show any large, like 4,000, 5,000 square foot homes.
or 10 or
Access to nature too. Upstairs in the group that I was in, to your point, there was a comment about access to the larger landscape, but also, with small homes, even close together, having that direct access, whether you're senior or young, to the natural environment, the outdoors.
Right.
Versus units that are squinched together that don't have that direct.
I think a
There's a lot of
lot of
discussion
their
about that.
reaction was buildings and parking lots, and that's all you have. And
Right.
there are a lot of places in Branford that are buildings and parking lots, and that's about all they have. And you might get a bush by your front.
Somebody made the comment, because we were in the room upstairs with all the beautiful paintings, and said, look around. The painting, this is old line. And so in everybody's mind, it was that natural environment.
Yeah.
So placing, again, scale and direct access to that natural environment, that is old line. I heard that 10 times upstairs.
So I think you wanted to talk about that moderate.
Yeah, I actually like that. I know a lot of people weren't in favor of that, but I think that fits into the community, and an elderly person would be absolutely okay in that.
and look at the comments, they're all over the place.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, there's a way to design it to where it can be flush.
People are like, oh, there were people who absolutely no, and there were people who
No, to that point. Like, we could, I don't know every inch and nook and cranny of Old Lyme. I don't know that I ever will. We could have a whole community that.
I would never know.
It matters. I like it.
We do have a similar house to that in Old Lyme.
But
Yeah.
well, the one up, that one, I was surprised the one up above, how much negative reaction there
Yeah,
was to that
I know.
house. But we've got a lot of,
Proximity of the other houses. I
It was
guess.
a-
That's, it's a rather dense neighborhood.
yeah, it was about, I think it was more about the neighborhood than the housing style. So, and I think
That's
that's one
part
of the
of-
things I
that's-
took away from.
That's what I think, though, that it was eliciting.
Yeah.
Just how dense a housing are you liking to see?
Yeah, it was about the
And I think
density.
you got a pretty good answer.
There's no density here and it still was not top choice. Yeah.
People just don't like the modern design.
There are some people, no modern, you know.
These curtains.
No. He doesn't need curtains. He's in the woods.
You need to wear pajamas. That's what.
Oh, yeah,
Okay, all right, this is taking a right hand turn. Let's move on.
We're finishing at 8:30, so we.
Oh,
do need
okay.
more.
Yeah, we need to.
But I will say that I think a lot of this discussion was like just, visceral feelings of like, I like it, I hate it. And without actually understanding what's actually inside that structure. Because you can hide density inside a structure and never know it. But it just depends, but people are responding to what they think it is.
Yeah.
I think your best bet to get affordable housing is in this section right
Some
here.
sort of prefab, the sort of thing that
Yeah.
you can bring in.
Absolutely.
Hop off the truck.
All right, let's go back to the. And then there was two remaining categories that.
Yeah.
And that's the young demographic appeal to that.
Yeah, I just think and when I look at all the cost options, that to me is the least cost.
And if you're trying to appeal to young people, that they'll react to.
So so the next one was better location of housing, which I think was organic controlled growth rather than large scale. I think maybe this is more speaks to infill potentially as to, instead of large development of hundreds of units, that you do smaller infill, smaller developments scattered around as opposed to a large homogeneous development. I think that's what it's saying. Community centered design, that was the question, what does that really mean?
Yeah.
But I think it's houses on small lots clustered around community spaces. Multifamily zones be reviewed to see if they're meeting the town's needs. Smaller mixed-use developments where appropriate. Focus new housing in already developed areas. Direct higher density housing to appropriate locations, which of course appropriate needs to be defined. The consensus seems to be that this should be where there is already infrastructure in place rather than creating new dense neighborhoods. Prioritize redevelopment and infill, explore transit-oriented development. Yeah, what are people's thoughts on that?
Is infill increasing density?
Infill,
And-
so infill could mean increasing density. It could mean building on a vacant lot in an area that's already developed. It could be, but yes, it would be putting more units in an area. So whether it is, subdividing a lot that's large enough to have two houses on it and one, yes, you would be increasing density.
When you say infill, it's not necessarily increasing the density that's allowed, but it is increasing the density that's there.
That exists.
Or
Or
that's, and that was one of the points that was made, is that if we took our current zoning and did a build out. So for example, people look at open space. It's not open space. Somebody owns that 30 acres. Unless it's protected by the land trust or the town open space committee, it's not open space. It's someone's land, and then they have the right to develop that. So obviously with constraints of wetlands and, whatever. But if it's 1 acre zoning, what are we going to get? And so how do we look at that build out and say like, oh, well, that's not really what we want. So that's where we need to be thinking. And that's what infilling can be looking at that. But a lot of times we talk about that, particularly in areas where we already have housing and then we have vacant lots in between. I know in my neighborhood, we have, a vacant lot right now.
Or it could be, let's say you have, underutilized or vacant sort of commercial property, and you replace that 1-story commercial building with a 2-story mixed use with commercial on the first floor and apartments above. That could also be considered infill. But infill is different than, let's say, taking that 30 acres and building 100 units on it. Infill is more, it's building in the existing built environment, and adding adding buildings where there's already development. But that seems like that's what the discussion here was
Yeah.
really was but smaller things sort of fitting stuff in existing areas as opposed to, taking 100-acre farm and turning that into a new subdivision.
And I guess, again, if you take this back, I'll look at it from your commission's perspective. Did the conversation at the meeting the other day capture this? Or is this something your commission would like to add to this discussion? Would be something you'd say, like, they captured it, we agree, or, oh, our commission thought of something else. So just think about that. And think about it in relationship to the different zoning areas we have,
And I'll raise your attention to F, which I think there's a lot to be thought about here. First of all, direct higher density housing to appropriate locations. That's going to be something that the town is going to be tasked with as part of the housing growth plans eventually. So I think that's a really important thing to think about. What is the appropriate locations? What does that even mean in town? And then this other question here, already infrastructure. We talked about the sewer issue, the sewer extension, and how that might be tapped out from day one. So the only changes that might be able to happen is where, you might be swapping one building for another building or something like, because you're not going to be able to.
You can't add any net capacity.
Really, the only infrastructure that exists, it would be that sewer. There is no other infrastructure.
Yeah, the
that would
only other
exist.
infrastructure you could think about is like, areas where in town where you might have sidewalks or maybe where the bus route goes, but you're not really talking about very much.
Well, right now, our Soundview isn't included in the sewer project, which is where the little limited commercial we have, that's where it is.
Yeah.
So we do have some options there.
Yeah.
We can look at some modern septic options. I don't know.
Can Cherry Stones area be built with septic?
Well,
I mean, they were talking.
It's
about
not in the sewer, it's not in the sewer,
Parking lot.
it's not in the sewer plan right now.
It's not.
No,
it's
Could be.
important to note.
no, it can't be
No.
included. No.
I mean,
Not in the current one.
it could not be built with sewers. I mean, it could not be built with septic.
It could be built with
Built
septic,
with
Yeah,
septic,
yeah.
yes, right.
but just so you know, the Cherry Stones is a separate building lot than the rest of the driving range.
It is.
so, but the three things you're gonna be looking at is on-site septic, well, we have water supply, and then handling stormwater. Because we have to handle the stormwater, and particularly if there's any, local streams or whatever nearby, making sure we handle that stormwater correctly is as critical, because that's what creates the flooding, not necessarily in that neighborhood, but downstream. So that's one of the things we'll be looking at. And that's where it's like, okay, that's where starting to think about, housing a little bit differently, where we might say smaller lots, but leaving more open space around it for subdivision, so low impact development, those types of things. There's challenges with that because they still have to have on-site septic. So it's like there's, and then we still have to have wells. So even when you do that low impact, it's not easy, but those are the things that you can look at.
Those are allowed right now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, you can have but what I'm saying is it's still not easy. It's like, even
It's
with.
not affordable.
It's like,
Right now, my understanding of this, for that commercials area that we're talking about, C10, C30, along 156, by, let's say, the Gulf Range, and all the way down to the police station. Right now, if you allow the mixed use into that area, mixed use and a good deal of that area is not feasible because of the retail in the first floor. So we're also saying, well, if you allowed multi-family housing in there, you would have constraints because you really can't use the sewer system. But there's maybe some possibility with looking at some advanced septic systems that might be able to serve something there. But right now, it's a commercial or mixed use. So right now, you do not allow that type of development. Right? So you're not allowing multifamily or cluster housing in that area.
You could have cluster housing.
Excuse me?
You could have cluster housing. They did propose cluster housing a while ago on the golf range. And then they scrapped it.
So cluster housing was not permitted under the current zoning.
Yes, it is. We have a cluster regulation. We do have cluster.
In that, for that commercial area, for commercial.
I don't know about whether it's part, so I don't think the commercial extends all the way back.
It's 400 feet or,
There was a commercial development proposed on the golf range probably 15 years ago. And it was never done. I think it wasn't, we didn't approve it.
But under the current restrictions of commercially zoned property, you can do cluster housing to them?
Oh,
Not on commercial.
it's,
Not
That,
commercial.
and where it was proposed was not commercial.
it's not commercial. That property you're talking about isn't.
he's talking more about basically from Cross Lanes to Breen Avenue.
Are you?
If you're,
I'm talking, yeah, from St. Cross Lanes all the way down. You're talking about also where Cherry Stones is and.
Yeah. Yeah, that's not,
no, that's C30 at Cherry Stones. And then it transitions to C10, right, at Cross Lanes, and it's C10 from Cross Lanes to Breen Avenue.
So we can look at that.
Yeah,
We're gonna
I'm
be
saying it
looking,
is.
we're gonna be looking to see if there's any change.
Okay, so I'm just saying,
So, and if you have recommendations from the planning commission,
yeah, wake up.
let us know.
I need curtains.
The whole sewer thing is interesting because.
Yeah, that is an,
Because, are there any businesses that are also tying in as well?
well, yeah, because there is commercial businesses in the C10 zone.
Because like, it depends on what business you have.
Yeah.
It's gonna let know what kind of businesses can be in the future.
Rooney's.
Teddy Rooney's?
Yes.
That's it? So it's just a
It goes, well, you got Teddy's, Rooney's, Dimitri's. You got
police station.
the police station. There's a commercial shop on the
That was
back
like-
against the railroad
Let's
tracks.
just wrap it up.
Your old property. So there is a few,
So they are-
there is definitely some commercial tenants in there.
Very few.
We already kind of worked all that.
Yeah, I'm just like looking at the last section, just to make sure we touch it on. This stuff, I think is actually, we've kind of covered it. Section 830G is, that 10% is not a mandate on the town. It's just an option for developers. And the reality is that you're not going to meet that. Most towns will never meet that. And that is not what this new Public Act 25-1 is going to require. The attendees were concerned the town's infrastructure was inadequate to serve the needs of a much larger population. But I guess the question is, are you expecting the town to grow to a much larger population that you would need more infrastructure? I guess, one of the issues for Connecticut and actually Old Lyme is doing a better job of attracting young families. But a lot of towns are facing population collapse because, the schools are having massive declines in enrollment and their declining population. The state in general is aging. So yes, that was a questionable one. Like, do we really expect Old Lyme to be growing significantly population wise? And there was a census states requirements to not consider Old Lyme's unique identity or not context. That goes without saying. Statewide zoning is inherently not context sensitive, and is the reason why I advocate against it. And the last one is the attendees acknowledged that a better mixture of housing was desirable, but seemed uniform in the belief that this was better handled at community level. And I agree.
so can I just ask all of you to consider, because that's why I asked you in the beginning about the beach areas. So the beach areas are served with infrastructure. They're the only part of town that is. They're also subject to flooding. That's also trying to be addressed, but only like a minimal patching. And this would include the properties north of 95 as well as south. So can you please tell us whether or not you really think that's where denser housing should be? Because it seems a little puzzling to me if that's what the conclusion would be, is that you want to have the beach areas be denser than they are already. And then if they're not, then where else would you put it? Because there's the constraints of the environmental conditions. So,
Sea level.
And that's the challenge that we're having both with the resilient committee, but also when we're looking at the environment, the environmental folks, and particularly the flood erosion control board, I almost forgot the name of the board. Flood erosion control board came back with us with some real, recommendations from a flood mitigation perspective, which is going to impact the coastal. So just understand we've got the, the housing, but now we also have the environmental constraint stuff, and it's like we're meshing all that together. So I think asking or really thinking about that, because there are a lot of people think about like, oh, lot, but it's like that's unique. But when we're doing zoning, we need to be,
it's town-wide.
if
We're
it's a challenge.
thinking about what the sewer system does be to those three communities that are negative. What is going to change there?
The groundwater.
Well, groundwater is going to improve. But it'll be
State says the nitrogen and the sound.
with those communities now, it's good that the sewer is going in. After heavy rains, we do get pollution into the sound, no doubt. And we
Well, in the streets too.
encourage the Southview area to move towards sewage. I think that might be part of it. So anyhow, there'll be these homes now being served by a sewer system. We're thinking that perhaps the density or number of people living in the area may increase because some of those homes are no longer being just seasonal. So people will be all, there for a while. And we'll be there the whole time, the whole year. What does that mean? Well, it probably helps the school situation. And we see a diminishing enrollment in online schools. So this might be help, and that now people are living there year round. So you're looking at maybe more, families living year round. What that means as far as density, it's good thing for a discussion. We should.
Yeah.
We talked about it.
Well, I think that's one of the things we'll be looking at in terms of a build out is like, are we expecting with the sewers going in, all the infilling? Are there lots that were not built on because of restrictions? So were there opportunity for smaller undersized lots that could not meet septic and well?
Yeah.
But how many are there? I mean, we all know, and it's going to be possibly the neighbor right next door, but are there? I mean, are we talking?
But have they been in the calculations for the sewer build?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
For full-time use, those are all considered.
They're all.
That they're
There's not that many
365.
available lots.
That's what I'm saying. There's not that many. We're
Right, it's
talking,
like,
I mean, everybody likes to talk about the infill, but it's like,
Yeah.
I was thinking, I was gonna throw out 10, but I wasn't sure what the number was. Like,
I mean, I could think of a couple in Dogwood, Sandalwood, and.
yeah,
and
I was thinking it's probably 10 to
couple around Old
15.
Colony.
But
that had
that's what,
houses
so
that
that's
people
what,
bought
I mean,
and
that's
made
what
it
we're
part of
looking
their
at.
yard.
Otherwise,
Interesting to know how many there are.
Not many. And a lot of people bought the lot next door so nobody else would build on it.
Right.
yeah,
Right.
No, right, but that's.
Right, and I'm not sure the people there want denser development, the people who own all those places down there.
It's gonna be tough.
Can't say.
Yeah.
I have a property in Old Lyme Shores. I have 2 vacant lots.
On what side? North or,
My property.
Route
There's
one?
also,
But on the south side or the north side of Route 1?
Okay, but they're 8,000 square feet.
South of Route 1 or north of Route 1?
I think the flood zone.
North of 150.
So they're north, so they're on the north side.
They're on the north side. Right, so if you said, well, I think we should go build on those lots, I don't think there's problems with doing it. I know that. I know there's a lot of, granite in the ground and so forth around that area. It'd be very hard to build something, there. The sewer might make it possible. So if the town allowed it, I'm not sure what I would do. I kind of like the space.
There you go. Exactly.
Oh, there you go.
About the groundwaters,
Well, the problem is you're depleting.
because the sewers are now taking the water
There's
out,
yeah.
and we're bringing water in. 4th of July, they have to bring in what.
Well, that's gonna be a problem. That's gonna be a serious problem.
So I don't see how groundwater's coming up with sewers.
No, when I said groundwater, I meant depletion of groundwater.
Depletion, oh, yeah.
I didn't mean increase, or equality increase. I meant
Aquifers are gonna-
exclusively the aquifer is gonna be tapped with no water going back into
Right.
it. I should have clarified that, but I didn't.
I will say that part of PA 25-1 is a statewide assessment of sewer capacity. And because the one thing that's brought up over and over again when some of these bills are debated at the Capitol is like, well, you should build more because you have sewer, not understanding what is built out capacity wise and what isn't. And so that has not yet started, but it's going to be an important and a really important element because it sort of tempers people's expectations of what can actually happen. And that, you know, the sewer extension that you have in town is really meant just for, yeah, I think that concept of sort of freezing you in time is an important one for that sewer. Are people, I guess, are required to get rid of their septic systems when they connect to the sewer? Yeah.
Which is a huge expense.
And I think that particularly in the shoreline area, when we're talking about density and we're talking about groundwater, it's also going to be saltwater intrusion. So we've got a whole host of things that's happening on the shoreline that complicates like what we should be expecting. And, you know, that's where it's like, okay, is this where we really should put our, you know, say that, oh, because we already have density there, that's what we should continue to have density and whatever. We've got constraints. So there's a lot of natural
And
constraints.
one of Old Lyme's prime natural resources is its shoreline. So is it really a good idea to say, well, this is where we want to crowd everybody down there? Because that's, even though you don't think about it, behind all of those little cottages, there's beautiful beaches. That's why they're there. And so it's something to, and there's definitely the Swan Brook problem, which I don't know whether it'll ever be solved. But that's the flooding and the very flat thing. And
They're doing stormwater treatment. That's no line short because of that.
yeah, but they don't have any place to put the water.
Right. That'll still be tide focused.
And if the
You know,
water's rising, then
What's going to be interesting to me is you drive by the Bragg Brook pump station by Rocky Neck right now on a weekly basis. The thing's out of service. Like they have extra pumps brought in. It's always under repair. And I can only imagine what it's going to look like and smell like once Old Lyme ties into that already failed system, in my opinion. It's going to be pretty scary.
I will just about the issue of stormwater, the COGS. So PA 25-1 provided some funding for COGS to help with housing planning, and also provided us money to do either stormwater planning or solid waste planning. It was supposed to be and/or, but they some more. So this year we are working on the issue of stormwater planning. In particular, we're looking at possibly doing some additional modeling work that's looking at severe rain events that are becoming more common, and it's an issue that's, you know, every single town in our region, the inland towns and the coastal towns, all dealing with rain events that are causing flooding in ways that, you know, we're not used to. And but the state is taking a much more I guess proactive approach towards resiliency. There was a resiliency law that passed this past session that requires them to map out their bridges and culverts and understanding capacity for stormwater. And there's also the municipal stormwater permits, so called MS4, which the state is trying to encourage the towns to comply with. So there's a lot of focus on where does the rain go in these storms.
Well, this last one was my basement.
Yeah.
mine too.
They couldn't handle it anymore.
So do
wrap
you
up.
see what our dilemma is?
Yeah. Well, I want to thank everybody for coming and
Me
just
too.
having a great discussion. Again, our intent with these focus groups was not to have this be the end of the discussion. You're the folks who will bring this back to your commissions, talk to them, come back to us with either written comments or, you know, if we need to schedule a meeting with you, we encourage you to attend our last forum, which is in September. You know, I can't remember the date of it.
September
15th.
15th.
September 15th.
At the
Thank you.
Limes
The senior
Senior
center.
And that's gonna, oh yeah, and that's gonna be we so that we can accommodate everybody, that's gonna be at the senior center. That one's gonna be on the commercial zones as well. And so that'll be our last community workshop. And then we'll have, the focus groups again on that. Once we get through the end of September, early October, we're gonna be ending the data gathering and start, putting out discussions on, so our consultant will be thinking like, oh, well, we heard this, what do you think about this, change to the zoning? And, they will probably be looking at that. And if, for example, it comes out that there's something very specific, we'll go back to the focus groups and say like, oh, we talked about this at this focus group. What do you guys think about this? So we'll be getting feedback back and forth on that. And that's our intent. And because we want to keep, again, the dialogue opening with not only, the other boards and commissions, but the staff. So we'll be talking to the Emergency Operations Center folks and the Public Works folks when we're talking about things like stormwater management. So just, like I said, the idea is to have an open dialogue as we're looking to do this.
When do we extend the survey? I know it was supposed to close on June 30th, but then we.
And
We
extended it to
extended,
July
we
30th.
extended it through the end of July. I know it's still open, so
might as well
they
just
may have
keep it running.
just, he may have decided that, like it's good information and keep it open until we're finished with the community, when we
Yeah.
finish the community workshops, it
I
will be
agree.
done.
Yeah, I think the longer you keep it open, the better.
So that's where I think it's just been open at this point.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you, everybody. Really appreciate your input. And please take it back and talk about it.
So please,
Bring it back.
Not a motion. There.
Oh, motion to adjourn
From me.
from Bonnie, second,
Second.
motion, second by Denise, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Yeah, this is gonna be.
That's what-